Hello, everyone. Welcome to a special Grid Life Wrap Up Monday edition. Busy weekend for everyone at the Grid Network. Of course, we're at Pro International Raceway, so Grid Encore will be tomorrow, Tuesday. Subscribe so you don't miss any of the action and reporting from Ben Schneider, Brandon Crossland, Joe Samaniego here, along with Amanda Kaufman. Big thank you for Amanda and Joshua for hosting Grid Life pre-race on Saturday. And we encourage everyone, be sure to check out our Patreon page. Invest in the Grid Network, each and every one. Colin Show, Mark Brown, and Dave invest in us, helping us get to the track at Portland International Raceway. Love to get more folks to the track more regularly. You could do that by clicking the link in the video description and also buy me a coffee. And Amanda, I know you and Joshua talked about the F1 race. Big thing we saw, and I think a lot of us anticipated, Max Verstappen, clean sweep, pole, fastest lap, got the win, over 20 seconds ahead of the competition. It was just long ways. But the big thing, Mercedes, they looked a lot stronger. They look like they can be now in contention a little bit, depending on the track, because they got second place, third place, and Sergio Perez had nothing for them. Do you believe Mercedes is back to bring the fight to Red Bull and Max Verstappen?
I think that Mercedes definitely it seemed to take a step forward this weekend in terms of where they've been, and hopefully it's not just due to the track, a track that was potentially better suited to their car, a track that they did well at last year even. Um, but it's obvious that Red Bull and Max especially are still leaps and bounds ahead of the Mercedes. But I think that it's probably encouraging to see that they weren't immediately caught by Perez. Maybe that's a testament more so towards George and Lewis being sort of evenly matched in terms of Perez with Perez in the Red Bull. But I think that it's definitely encouraging for Mercedes to have been able to keep him behind and land two of their cars on the podium.
That's be very, very much a good feeling to have both cars on the podium. Both of them look great, especially George Russell, as you had mentioned, bringing it up. But the one thing we've noticed, qualifying Russell Hamilton, they had to get together. We've seen in the past, teammates, especially when they're both fast and they both trying to get a higher spot on the podium, sometimes tensions flare. Do you think there could be some tension between Lewis Hamilton and George Russell?
I think that they'll be all right. I think that obviously Lewis has had the experience of not getting along with a teammate in the past and has been through that and is probably looking to avoid that, as well as the fact that whenever George is asked the same question, he always sort of brings up the fact that him and Lewis are at very different spots in their career. And I think their roles within Mercedes are very clearly defined and have been since George started there. So obviously, George tends to get a little antsy when he's behind Hamilton and asking to switch positions. He's kind of famous for being on the radio for that. But I think that things seem to be working well at Mercedes and they're all focused on bringing the team forward. Whereas I think if they were maybe in the position that Red Bull is in currently and clearly leading the constructors, it might be a little bit of a different story in terms of how they're working as teammates, but things seem to be going well currently.
Seems to be going well. I think you bring up a great point. They're working together to try to bring Mercedes back up to that level with Red Bull. Easier for the drivers to put aside differences with a common goal, and they seem a lot closer to it. Quick comment in the chat room. No Joshua Birch today. He has taken a couple days off, getting ready for the 24 hours of Le Mans. I know we're going to be very excited for that race. So it's going to be a busy weekend for Joshua. So he's going to take the next couple of days off for the 24 hours of Le Mans because we're going to have coverage right here, starting with Grid tonight on Wednesday. Of course, Mercedes, we've been talking about them. Aston Martin, they've been sort of that other team on the podium behind the two Red Bulls. Fernando Alonso had his worst race, though. 7th place finish, and Lance Stroll finished ahead of him, 6th place. One point was even in 3rd place, and I was thinking he might get his first podium, but then the Mercedes got around him. Because the Mercedes double podium, they got around Aston Martin in the Constructors' Championships. It's really interesting though because one of the big things, Mercedes now ahead of Aston Martin. They are 28 points ahead now because of the double podium, but they are still very far from Red Bull. Hamilton, he is now 12 points behind Fernando Alonso in the World Drivers' Championship standings. Do you believe this was going to be something where Aston Martin was just not that great because this track was better suited for Mercedes?
I think that it's interesting because, like you said, Lance was able to get ahead of the Mercedes briefly and then slipped back. But Fernando Alonso didn't seem to particularly being be very racy in the sense that like he caught up to his teammate, closed in on his teammate, and then just told the team, "I'm willing to stay back here." Where maybe you could argue that he wasn't close enough to get finish any higher than right in front of Lance, but it's kind of an odd one. But there, the Aston Martin is definitely still near the front. It might have been interesting to see what might have happened if they might have been able to race the McLaren if Lando's start had been a little different and see where they're at in terms of McLaren. But I think that it'll be interesting to see if Aston Martin continues on the good streak that they're having after this race and can kind of put this race behind them as a little blip. And even for a blip, they're doing a lot better than most of the other teams on the grid, especially a team like Ferrari that struggled a lot this weekend.
Yeah, I'm convinced they could be for sure easily the third place team because, as you mentioned, Ferrari and their struggles this weekend. I know you all talked about Charles Leclerc not making out of Q1. That team seems to be going backwards. Sainz started up front, but then fell back. Fifth place finish, and Charles Leclerc, no points scored. Huge missed opportunity for that team to even just score points. They are still behind Aston Martin in the constructors standing, in total 34 points behind Aston Martin. Do you think that's going to be sort of the next real fight we're going to see, Aston Martin and Ferrari, or could Ferrari even bring the fight to Aston Martin?
I mean, Ferrari really has to turn things around, and we've kind of been saying this week over week, but they definitely need to take a step forward to be able to compete with Aston, compete with Mercedes. Red Bull's too far gone, it seems, for them to be any sort of challenge for the Ferraris to challenge at this point. But yeah, it's definitely a horrible weekend for Ferrari, one that they want to forget. But I think that Ferrari and Aston could make for an interesting battle as we get towards the middle of the season and potentially a fight to the finish to see who finishes third, maybe even second in the constructors.
Third, potentially second. It's going to be really interesting for the rest of the season. The midfield seems like it's really close. I think everyone is still quite away from Red Bull, but that second, third place could be something else. We're going to be following that throughout the year. Now, Amanda, Formula One, that was a pretty tame race, I would say, up front. But if you were watching the mid pack, a lot of action. But one race, well, actually two race weekends. I know you all covered the first one for Formula E. The second one, wow, that was a really good race.
Yeah, race 2 saw Maximilian Gunther take pole and take a convening win. They were nearly 3 seconds away from second place, bringing Maserati their first win. Jake Dennis second and Mitch Evans third round out on the podium finishers, where Pascal Wehrlein finished sixth and now leads Jake Dennis by just 1 point. Nick Cassidy is only 6 points away from the lead. So, Joe, are you surprised by how the championship title battle has tightened up?
I am surprised because it felt like not too long ago we're talking about Pascal Wehrlein could potentially be consistent enough to get a championship run going. And I feel like he still has been consistent where he is scoring points. But Jake Dennis has closed the gap. He didn't get the wins, but he definitely is gaining on him. Nick Cassidy, only 6 points away. And we're getting down to it in the season where it's going to be really important to get some good races. I'm starting to think maybe Pascal Wehrlein cannot be consistent enough and has to step it up, get those wins because what we're seeing with these three drivers, Nick Cassidy, I think, could go out there and get wins. So could Jake Dennis. Of course, Formula E, you need to have good runs. Mitch Evans, I would say he would be still a contender, but even what we saw with him and Sam Bird, the contact, I just don't see that team being championship caliber yet. They could get wins, but it just always seems to be one step behind everybody else. Where for those three drivers, Nick Cassidy, Pascal Wehrlein, Jake Dennis, I think it's going to be coming down to those three.
Interesting. Well, 5 races remain, and mathematically, every driver is still eligible for the championship. Portland will be the first opportunity for those in the points battle lead. What's surprising in some of the names in danger of being eliminated to you? Those include Andre Lothair is in 14th, Lucas Degrassi is in 16th, and Eduardo Montara is 18th. All three anticipated being much higher in the points, even when contending for wins and championship, with 29 points available each race. 25 for the women, 3 if you take pole, and 1 for the fastest lap. Are these 3 going to see their championship hopes end at Portland?
I'm going to say yes, they will see their championship season, their championship contention come to an end at Portland. Eduardo Montara, this is not the season he wanted to have. After being in championship contention the last 2 years, a lot of people thought this would be it, especially with Maserati. Has not gone his way at all. Lucas Degrassi, a lot of folks anticipate him, Mahindra, will get back to that more competitive stage that Mahindra was on when they had Felix Rosenqvist getting wins. Nothing. And then Andre Lara, 14th place. It seemed like quite often in the past we would talk about him being a potential race-winning driver. That is just not occurring. The fact that they're so far behind the points, even if they were to score 3rd place or better, if the winner gets the pole, there's going to be a lot of points you just still missed out on. The fastest lap, each and every point is very important in Formula E. It's physical racing, and I just don't see those drivers as far low as they are. I don't see them catching up unless the top 3 we've talked about are to all of a sudden crash out and not score points, then they're back in the game. But really, they're sort of now hoping they have the bad luck because at the end, I don't see them continuing their championship run after Portland unless they get lucky at the expense of the top 3 drivers in the championship picture.
Well, like you said, the next round is the Portland E-Prix at Portland International Raceway. And Joe, you and Ben were there yesterday for a physical and wild Xfinity race. For INDYCAR, the track has seen between 3 to 4 cautions, and last year, the first time only with 1 caution. What do you anticipate coming up for the Formula E-Prix at Portland?
I anticipate we're going to probably see what we call typical Formula E beating and banging. What I'm really curious about, we saw on the track map online on the Formula E website, is showing the full current course for Portland. So that means the Shelton chicane, where we saw drivers going for spins, a lot of contact, especially on the restarts. The long backstretch, it's a curved backstretch. I anticipate a lot of drivers. You don't want to lead this race, just like what we've seen in Germany. The leader is going to be using up more energy. You're going to be really want to draft behind it, and then you have a couple quick corners before that long sleeping right-hand turn, and then the long front stretch. I'm really curious to see if they're going to eventually update the track map to show some additional chicanes, especially on that back stretch, maybe something on the front stretch. But it is a 1.9 mile track, 12 turns, not a whole lot of elevation changes. So I think we're going to see a pretty intense race where you're going to have a lot of drivers drafting, slipstreaming, making those moves on the last corner, the shelter chicane, and that's where we're going to see the contact. That's where we're going to see drivers pushing each other. And of course, one of the things we saw during the races, both of the Xfinity Series and ARCA, if two drivers ahead, if you exit that Shelton chicane without the speed and you're that third driver behind, you can make a pass entering the S's at the end of the long straightaway. So I think we're going to be seeing a very exciting Portland E-Prix weekend. I know Ben and I just cannot wait for that race weekend.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's something else very awesome, and definitely, of course, Ben, Brandon, they'll be on the air tomorrow for Grid Live Encore with the Portland race weekend and other races that are going to recap, including the Truck Series at Gateway, which, man, the Gateway, that was a really exciting race, but INDYCAR, I think that race surprised a lot of people because a lot of people were not sure what's going to happen with this new track. We did see quite a few caution flags. We saw some passes, some action. And at the end, Alex Palou, I think he had a little bit easy up front, dominated, held off Will Power to take this second win of the year and second in 3 races. We know he was very competitive at the Indianapolis 500 until Rinus VeeKay got into him in pit road. The next racetrack, and I think this is bad news if you're racing against Alex Palou, Road America. Alex Palou has won there. He's always faster in Road America, and he has a 51-point lead over Marcus Ericsson. So very likely he's going to leave with the points lead. Does this put everyone on notice that Alex Palou is on a championship run?
I think absolutely, yes. He seems very strong, even in the Indy 500 when he was unfortunately sort of taken out in pit lane and caught up in that incident with VeeKay. He managed to make a really strong comeback and pretty much salvage his day from a race that he pretty much should have been out of or just towards the back. I also think that he is very consistent and able to do that when things maybe don't go his way in terms of the win. He's still able to do what a lot of drivers can't and develop that consistency, which has seen drivers like Will Power take home the championship, even Alex Palou take home the championship before, with drivers that have the understanding that it's not always about the wins, but sometimes also about where you finish on a bad day.
Yeah, definitely when it comes to having a bad day, you got to try to say everything you can up front because at the end, IndyCar, I feel, is very competitive series. It's going to be really interesting to see what happens. Next race, as I mentioned, Road America. One driver I think that's going to be excited for Road America and not being on the street course where you got the concrete walls so close to you. Pato O'Ward, his race came apart on pit road with that loose tire. Then when he was about to go a lap down to Alex Palou, he crashed into the wall. He is the second to last place car to finish. Callum Isla was the only driver behind him after that first lap crash. So big missed points for Pato O'Ward, that McLaren team. One of the things I found interesting, Amanda, was Pato O'Ward said in the interview he had no choice but to go for the move around Santino Ferrucci because either A, he was going to get lapped down or race over, or B, make the move, try not to hit the wall, race over. Do you agree with that he had no choice but to go for that move?
I think the other choice, like you said, was either to go a lap down, but I think even from there he could have waited and to find a better opportunity to potentially unlap himself or even avoid going a lap down, because I think that everyone would agree that going a lap down is better than crashing out of the race. And it seemed like with Pato, he kind of tends to develop like he's a very eager driver, and that's what gets him wins. That's what has him in a great position towards the end of the race for a lot of the time, and what had him so high in the point standing up until this weekend. But I think that this isn't the first race where maybe not all due to his own fault, but he hasn't been able to finish quite a few or multiple races this season, and I think that that's going to hurt him. And he's kind of doing the opposite of someone like Alex Below, who's maybe thinking more long term, more championship, uh, more in terms of the championship and what he needs to do down the road to be able to build that points lead and take home the title.
Yeah, he can't be winning a title by having these kind of issues. And 2 in a row now to crash out, that is not how you're going to get a championship. He's got himself a little bit of distance to make up, and of course, needs Pillow to potentially have some bad luck as well. One of the big things, another driver that I feel has been pretty disappointing, Roman Grosjean. Second season at Andretti Motorsports, Autosport. A lot of potential to get a championship contending, but once again, he has crashed out. And 4 races now, he has crashed out. 2 in a row with Indianapolis 500. And the 3 races he hasn't crashed out, 2 second-place finishes, the great 11th place finish. Not ideal, but still 1 position away from the top 10 finish. Get those valuable points. Starting to remind me a little bit of Roman Grosjean in the early days of F1, who was brand new with Renault, Lotus, unfortunately crashing, even get a race ban. We talked about just with award, you need to finish those races. That has not occurred with Roman Grosjean. Second season with Unrated Autosports. Do you think there could be some pressure building on Grosjean to perform?
Yeah, it's definitely not a great look for Grosjean to have him going through a bit of what seems like a crash streak once again. I mean, that was sort of his reputation in F1, unfortunately, and he left the seat left he went out kind of with that reputation, and people were surprised and like pretty enthused to see him doing well in IndyCar and able to finish races and seem to be even coming into the season as someone who could fight for a title with his 2 second-place finishes. But I think that, like Pato, the trouble comes with what he's able, the fact that he's unable to finish races um, when he's not up front or necessarily get the car to the end. I think that he's a bit crash prone, and it makes sense for the team to be putting a little pressure on him to perform a little bit more consistently and be able to keep the car clean and make long-term championship decisions.
Getting those long-term decisions to get the championship, very, very big. A couple comments in the chat room. Iron Kong 26. Good evening. Good to have you here on a special Monday Grid Live wrap up. And then Grosjean is too expensive opposed to his productive return. He said his cars had suspension failure in Detroit. It's always interesting, a driver would say it's something else, doesn't want to say like it was a mistake or all that. He seems to get frantic when he's not up front. He has to understand to just get the car back and get the points. I think I'm totally agreeing with what you had said, Amanda, that the points is really what's going to get you that championship, because we saw last year, Will Power, 1 win, got the championship, compared to Joseph Newgarden, multiple wins, not the championship. And already Alex Palou with 2 wins this year. He has, believe matches win total so far like he did in 2021. So if he could stay consistent like he did in 2021, everybody got to really be careful, as you said in the first question for IndyCar. IndyCar, it's going to be very exciting to watch. One race, that was exciting, but at the same time, very long. The Cup Series at Gateway.
Yeah, definitely a long race that I haven't even had a chance to finish yet. But Joe, I know that you got through it and stuck with it last night. The NASCAR Cup Series saw Kyle Busch win a 5-hour-long 300-mile race. There were 3 red flags, one of which included them taking time to stop and repair the safer barrier. 4 different brake disc failures occurred during the race. So, Joe, what do you think caused these brake failures to occur, and can something be done about it to prevent them?
So one of the things they've been talking about is their steel metal brakes calibers. When they get hot, they can handle it as long as they consistently stay hot. So like Martinsville, a road course where you're always using them. Gateway was just long enough. The straightaways they will cool down, get hot, cool down, get hot. Now, not a whole lot has changed from last year where we didn't see this really occurring. But we saw it this year and it was a little bit cooler than last year because we had a lot of cloud cover. So I'm one curious about were the teams doing something to try to reduce the amount of air going through the openings because you have less openings, you're going to have more downforce. You needed that front downforce for those cars. We saw some cars slide up the track, getting tight. So I'm curious to see, particularly with the two 2311 cars, Bubba Wallace, Tyler Reddick, they had issues. The other drivers that we saw with issues was Noah Gregson. I'm really curious to see if they had something change where that's what it caused it to have the failures with them. We also saw Carson Hocevar had that issue as well too. Maybe again, just trying to do something to get that front downforce and remove the air openings. Now, one of the things they did talk about was carbon brakes. They could do much more heat, cool off. You'll see them in the other series use them, but they went with the steel brakes. So I think this is something NASCAR will look at. I wonder though, if NASCAR does find out, okay, it was something where they figure a way to try to create more downforce, just like how you can't use grill tape. I would not be surprised if then NASCAR issues a memo to everyone saying, hey, when it comes to brake openings, you cannot adjust them, especially at a track like Gateway. Because my biggest concern was not only a brake failure and a hard hit like Noah Gregson. We were lucky that all three of them, when they had a brake failure, they were up against the wall. So that brake couldn't fly too far, hit the wall, bounce back on the track. I would hate to think if a brake failure was occurring that caliber blows and you have some flying projectiles towards the catch fence. That becomes a safety issue, and that's where I'm hoping NASCAR is going to start looking at for potential changes.
Yeah, those 4 brake failures made up just part of the 11 cautions that took place during the race. Did the number of cautions during the race surprise you at all?
It did. It really did surprise me. Just because I anticipated, okay, this is the second year at Gateway. We're probably going to see more of a routine race because we know passing is going to be very tricky. And that was the case. The restarts, we knew that was the best opportunity for passing. We saw that occurring. I was just really blown away at the fact that we had 11 cautions and it was quite physical. I'm really curious to see what NASCAR goes with the Austin Cindric, Austin Dillon mess. I know Austin Dillon was very upset, saying he should be suspended. Looking at the video, well, I think a lot of people are now going to be saying, was that a right hook? Was that not a right hook because of what happened with Chase Elliott? But yeah, this race to have 11 cautions, I would have not anticipated that because when I think of races with 11 plus cautions, I think of Bristol, the night race there, Darlington. The Coke 600 is so long that you are going to likely have 11 cautions. But those kind of tracks, not the track like Gateway, even some of the super speedways where you may have 3 or 4 cautions, but they're usually bigger wrecks. This was a big surprise to me, and I think for the drivers too, that added challenge that the team couldn't tell them the data because of the power outage that everyone had suffered. No telemetry data, almost sort of older style. I think that could have played a role when it comes to making those adjustments, getting those cars handling better. But it was for considering another 5 hour race, but this time it was half the distance of the Coca-Cola 600. Granted, I think, the last red flag to repair the safety barrier, much needed. The first one to essentially get everyone covered because there was heat lightning, and then that second red flag to clean up the mess from Noah Gregson's big crash. I think all three red flags were needed. Just one of those deals where this race just really did not seem to want it to end. And I think everyone in Gateway, at least the ones that stuck around, could say they saw a really good race. Could it be shorter? Of course. 5 hours was not planned, but yeah, very physical race. That really caught me by surprise.
Yeah, definitely a bit of a chaotic race, and definitely a ton of cautions and a bit unexpected. So, on to another topic, NASCAR related. In Denny's bracket challenge, William Byron versus Brad Keselowski. Whose is the favorite to win at Sonoma?
I think it's pretty straightforward. I think it's going to be William Byron. I just don't see Brad Keselowski as sort of a road course driving ace. The 24 Hendrick Motorsports, they have the data, the history of winning there. He just has to finish ahead of Brad Keselowski, and I think that could occur. Keselowski got really lucky. He was paired up with Bubba Wallace. Bubba Wallace was on track for another top 10 finish. Then that brake caliber rotor issue done for. Keselowski was a much slower car, finished ahead. Byron, I think this really indicates that Byron has been hard to beat up front all the time, consistent, which is a big thing. I think he's really starting to show potential, and I think he's going to get that. Unofficial, because I know there's no trophy or anything, Denny's bracket challenge. Who do you see taking that?
Yeah, I think it's a tough one. Brad Keselowski is kind of a surprise and has been kind of surprised me this season. But I think that, like you said, William Byron's consistency is gonna have him get the edge on this one to potentially eke out the win over Keselowski.
Indeed, it's going to be really interesting to see. And I know it looks like we have a comment in the chat room too, as well. Pulling that up from Ben Schneider. Cindric definitely moved left a tad, but a head on angle suggested Dylan moved up. The track at the same time, completely different and should just be considered a racing incident, in my opinion. Man, I know a lot of opinions have been flying because of the Chase Elliott deal. Watching the tape, I would say what Ben is saying seems to be what did occur. So I'm not anticipating a driver being suspended, but I think it'll be something where going forward we're going to be probably hearing drivers calling for that. And of course, season still regular season, got quite a bit of racing before we get into the playoffs. One series, no playoffs, but their season starting to get a little bit towards the halfway point now. World Rally Championship, a dramatic World Rally Championship Rally Italy saw Sebastian Ogier lose the win after going off the road Saturday in the closing stages. Literally just after we were on the air on Saturday, talk about how he was leading. He goes off. This handed the lead to Thierry Neuville, and he had to fight really hard on a wet, muddy stage to get the win. And for Hyundai, a 1-2 finish, their first win since the passing of Craig Breen. Kali Rovanpera, third place finish. This means he is now 25 points ahead of Thierry Neuville in the World Rally Championship driver standings. Rally Kenya is next. That is going to be a physical. If we thought Rally Italy was physical enough, that one has always been very physical. And then Sebastian Ogier, boy, after that heartbreak, he has fallen out with the grid ranking top 10. He was in the top 10, no longer. They're moving up into the top 10 though, and up a bunch of positions. Alex Palou, another win. He has gotten up to third, the highest he has been. But Max Verstappen extends his lead over the field with that win, pole, and now another win in a row. The other driver moved up, William Byron. The consistency is starting to come together. He is back in the top 10. And Sergio Perez moves up to the top 10 with a fourth place finish. And then, of course, Sebastian Ogier falling all the way down to 14th place, as you can see. Nick Cassidy also fell out as well after not finishing in the top 10 in the second race. Big thing, of course, George Russell is now the tail end of the field. So for the first time this year, And first time since really 2021, no Formula One driver from Ferrari is in the grid ranking. You got the two Mercedes, Fernando Alonso, and the two Red Bulls. Very interesting week 10 for the grid ranking. Of course, one of the big things we encourage everyone be sure to follow the Grid Endurance Performance Index, their big race weekend, the 24 hours of Le Mans this weekend. Do not want to miss that, and be sure to subscribe to the Grid Network right here.
Yeah, definitely an exciting weekend coming up. But to recap this weekend, Joe, what was your one shining moment from this past weekend?
I have one shining moments. The second one I will share on tomorrow's wrap up show, and I think everyone sort of has a good idea of what that is. But definitely for my one shining moment for this show, I'm going to go with Kyle Busch getting that third win. When he got that win, there was quite a lot of cheers in the grandstand. We remember when he was winning all the time, getting the boos, just he was still playing it up, and but now he's getting cheered. I think he has the respect of fans, that have seen him go from not doing anything really last year with Joe Gibbs Racing. The last couple of years, people wondering, is he the real deal? To now, he's making this work with Richard Childress Racing. He's getting the 8-car towards the front. And now he has matched William Byron with a number of wins this year at 3 wins, most of any driver, tied with William Byron. I think that says a lot for especially the people that were doubting if this was going to be a right move, because RCR, they didn't seem exactly championship caliber last year. That A team got into playoffs, but was eliminated really quickly. I think that's the difference starting out. It seems Kyle Busch has really gotten that team motivated. The consistency is sort of lacking compared to William Byron, but unless something goes wrong in the playoffs, I see that team easily advancing out of the round of 16 to the next round.
Awesome. Yeah. For my one shining moment, I'm going to have to give it to INDYCAR. Coming off of the month of May and the 500, I think a lot of expected, or it would have made sense for the race to be a little more chaotic, even with teams not having a ton of time to prepare. But I think for the most part, maybe barring the last 20 minutes, things went pretty well, and we saw a lot of great racing. And then watching them be able to break in the track and Alex Blow pull off the win was great.
A great race weekend overall. Of course, Ben is going to be on the air tomorrow with Brandon Crossland for Grid Life Wrap Up to talk more about the race weekend at Portland, the Truck Series at Gateway. A lot more programs up ahead. And of course, Wednesday Grid tonight, where we're going to preview the 24 hours of Le Mans, and we do it all over again. More normal schedule. We won't be at the track, but Grid Live pre-race Saturday, noon Eastern, and then the wrap-up Sunday, unless the NASCAR race goes again another 5 hours, but hopefully that's not the case. But don't miss any of our programs. Be sure to subscribe and hit the bell icon so that way you don't miss any of our programs, because one of the big things, we do this because we enjoy providing motorsports content for you, the viewers. You can help us by investing in the Grid Network, calling the show, Mark, Robin, David, all invest in us each and every month. Help us get to the track like we did this past race weekend. And we want to encourage everyone to also buy me a coffee. Highly recommend considering buying coffee, especially for folks like Amanda, Josh, who have stepped up when we were at the track. Show your appreciation for them being on the air. Definitely great weekend overall here at the Grid Network. One comment in the chat room. Sorry you covered. What do you make of the Hendrick cars over in Le Mans? Of course, Amanda, we know Garage 56 at Le Mans. I gotta say, I'm pretty excited about this. I know this is a little special class, but to see a NASCAR Cup car fitted with headlights and taillights too in this race, I think it's going to be a lot of fun. And I sort of hope, personally, I think it would be great if NASCAR decided, hey, next year we're going to do the same, but let's make it an off weekend because we got Jimmy Johnson there. But I think it would be great to see a current Cup driver get that opportunity to race in Le Mans. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, definitely. I think even this year, having the car there, having Jimmy Johnson there, great PR for NASCAR. I mean, all attention's on that car for sure. It's definitely stands out from the rest. But yeah, I think that NASCAR hopefully will make this a thing, and to have it on an off weekend for NASCAR, I think that would be great to have a high profile driver. Obviously, Jimmy Johnson is high profile, but a current Cup Series driver in the car as well could be pretty cool.
Indeed, it'll be great to see a current Cup driver take that challenge and then come back. And one of the things now that we're seeing quite a few Cup Series drivers being really good at the road courses. We know Supercars, other series, they will be purposely off on that weekend for the Le Mans 24 hours. It would be nice if NASCAR decides, hey, let's do that in case a driver wants to be over there, not with the Garage 56, but maybe with one of the other classes. I don't think hypercar, but you never know. We did see Jimmy Johnson doing the Daytona prototype racing in IMSA. I think it'd be great to see more NASCAR drivers in the Le Mans 24 hours. Arjen Kong, thank you so much for that comment and question. And we encourage everyone, if you're watching this after we were live on there, leave a comment, like the video, so that way we can respond to your questions and comments. For Amanda Kaufman, I'm Joe San Diego. Thank you for watching today's program. We'll see you next time. Thank you for watching us right here on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe and check out some of our other videos, including Life on the Grid, where we interview folks from the motorsports industry. Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time.